Thank you so much, Ananya. That was really generous and really kind. But I think
Also true.
no, I think it's really quite amazing how, if we were to track the trajectory of how we became writing teachers, and it gets intertwined really now at one level with the larger, our institutional trajectories and how writing pedagogy has sort of grown right in front of us, with us. So I think that that's always it takes like 5 minutes of this to say, oh wow, yes, really. So yeah, thank you so much for this very generous introduction. And hi everyone. Thank you for coming here today. We've already had, if because I see quite a few names which I've been seeing in the last few panels as well, and the last discussion workshops as well. So clearly, this last day and a half has been a set of really fabulous workshops slash panels slash discussions. And if the last few panel discussions are anything to go by, I think the panel discussion that we'll have right now seems to promise like a fitting culmination to some of the themes that have come up in the last day and a half as well. And also, I think, it's great that Ananya introduced Center for Writing and Pedagogy and the larger sort of values underlying it, because I think this whole point that you brought, Ananya, that writing center work, right, can actually be plugged into the larger work of pedagogy as well. And I think, if I look at the abstracts of panels of the presentations today, I think all of them actually are probably speaking to not just teaching writing, but actually a larger pedagogical concern. So I think, and we'll, these issues will come up as the presentations happen. So I'm not going to take more time. Welcome everyone to this panel and of making offline strategies work online. We'll jump right in. We have 3 presentations lined up. Each presentation will last for about 15 to 20 minutes. I will be keeping time. So I will pop up when you have about 3 minutes left, right? We begin with the first presentation. We begin with Sandeep Sen. Hello, Sandeep. And Sandeep Sen heads the Vedica Writing and Communication Center at the Vedica Scholars Program for Women, which is the only writing center for a management program in the country. Also, one more reason why we need to talk more to you, Sandeep. Sandeep teaches, his focus is in writing and communicating for impact for wider audiences. But apart from teaching, he also is closely involved with the administration of the academic program at Vedika Scholars Program. So thank you, Sandeep. And his presentation is titled Focused Groups, Improving Student Engagement in a Critical Writing Course. So over to you, Sandeep.
Hi. Hi. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And so focus groups is a course that we introduced at the Vedica Writing program. The reason for this was twofold. Number one was creating a space for discussions in critical writing modules. And number two was that somewhere between 8 months, Vedica Scholars Program is an 18 months long program. So somewhere in between 8 and 10 months, we notice a dip in participation and engagement of our students. Right. So before me, Saurav Goswami headed the center, and he would tell me, we need to look at the classroom closely, ask a few questions about the structure of our classroom, and if there are things that we can do to, put the faculty and the students in an environment that is more conducive to learning, rather than just saying that, students are not interested. So this was one of the, you could say, experiments that we did at the program. It's a management program, and our dean was kind enough to let us try this out. Let me introduce the faculty members who were involved in this course. There were 5 faculty members. Saurav Goswami, who teaches at Nine Dot Institutions. Nandini Nair, who writes for the Open magazine. She's a writer and an editor. Mohini Gupta, who is a translator. Priyanka Kapoor works with me at the center, and myself. So together, we were all quite familiar with the program. We were quite aware of some of the problems that students face where writing is concerned, where critical thinking is concerned. And we got together, and over months we figured out that, okay, maybe smaller groups, smaller discussions is what would really benefit them. Now, some of the objectives that we outlined were, number one, this was the first course that we had to deliver completely online. That somehow turned to our favor. We wanted to expose our students to a wide variety of texts. We also wanted to focus on individual attention. The batch, this was first conducted for batch 5, where the batch was 62 students strong. And what we did was we broke it down into 4 groups. So the class size was broken to a smaller strength of 15, right? Emphasis on conversations. So the intention behind this course was not to teach them theory, and not to get them into classrooms and get them to learn any sort of models of communication, rather to introduce them to different topics and get them to start talking and engaging with them. So the classes were short, 1 and 1.5 hours long, as opposed to our usual classes, which are 2 hours long. And yeah, the intent was to decrease the workload and keep it engaging. Like I said, a typical course is 20 hours long. We have sessions of 2 hours, led by 1 instructor. Typical number of assignments per course is 4, and class size is 62, as opposed to the focus groups, where there were 5 instructors in this module. Every individual student would go through 12 hours of discussion. Number of assignments were only 1, and there were 15 students in the class. As for feedback that was provided to students on the assignments, we tried our best to give inline edits and comments for every assignment, so that students would understand where they're making the errors and how they can improve, as opposed to a general paragraph of comment at the end of the assignment, where which is common for most programs, most modules in the program, right? Yeah. So yeah, the focus groups, some of the elements which have already been discussed, I want to go over them once again, is that all instructors would meet all 4 groups for 3 hours each, and they would do 2 things in these 3 hours. The first session would be spent in discussing the text. So every instructor would have a set of pre-readings. In some cases, there were videos, there were poems, there were texts, and there were grammar lessons, especially for Saurav Goswami. His topic was on grammar matters. So there were a wide variety of texts which were prescribed to students. There were a wide variety of the nature of discussions were quite different. So Mohini Gupta would come in and talk about languages, where she would ask students to bring in a poem that they've read in their mother tongue, and then they would discuss that in class. So the first 1.5 hours would always be spent in discussing the text that they have read, and the second session would be focused on an activity that the instructor would have designed. So all instructors met all 4 groups, and yeah, so at the end of the second session would be an assignment that would that a student could pick from any one instructor. The nature of the class was small heterogeneous groups. What I mean by this is, okay, a little bit of context is important here. As I said, the program is 18 months long. So as soon as the student enters the program, the Vedica Writing and Communication Center creates a profile of the student based on their language proficiency to begin with. We hold one-on-one discussions. We have benchmarking tests and public speaking modules, which allow us uh, to gauge what their level of language proficiency is. Are they good communicators or not? More often than not, we find that students who communicate well tend to stick with each other. So as a result of that, we felt that maybe we would want to break some of these cliques. So the way in which these groups were decided were that we mixed up the students who were good at using the English language with students who were not. Uh, the small class size allowed instructors to identify students who would otherwise hide in the large class. Um, Feedback on the nature of the groups, right? So what we found was that it was not just the faculty members who felt that smaller groups helped, but also students. They discovered things about their peers that they wouldn't usually. An example is that here a student says that she never knew that her friend wrote poems. um, she hadn't even heard her speak in class before. So these smaller groups, these smaller classes became a space for our students to better express themselves. Uh, as you can see, the faculty members also attest to the fact that diverse perspectives were beginning to emerge, and although all of them were reading the same text, the discussions allowed for every class to be unique, and every group's unique nature was sort of being highlighted. Yeah, and yeah, as I've already mentioned that students had to read the go through the readings before class. There were no theory which was discussed in the sessions, and students who didn't speak up were sort of forced to participate in the discussions. Another feature that another feature that we wanted to experiment with was what happens when you have multiple faculty for the same module. This was again a result of the feedback we received from our students. Some students find faculty members are hard to communicate with. Some students are afraid of faculty members, and the kind of activities that each faculty member brings with him or her are suited to some, whereas others don't tend to agree with the kind of activities that are designed in class. So we felt, okay, maybe a diversity in the kind of activities and in the type of faculty members is what we can experiment with and see what that brings for us. So faculty members were given free rein to hold discussions, and like I said, every group had a different type of discussion. The way in which the direction in which the discussions went were unique. Some of the examples of activities that were held: free writing by Nandini Nair, who's a writer and editor, uh, writing a poem in your mother tongue by Mohini, assuming the identity of a fictional character and playing that character. That was an activity that I did for building narratives. Saurabh Goswami asked people to bring concepts of grammar that fascinate them, and so forth. And finally, the kind of assignments. Another thing which was unique was that there was only one final assignment in this course. We allowed students to pick one assignment from an instructor that they felt they really benefited from. These were the 5 questions. These are parts of the questions. These are 5 questions that were posed. Relationship with the Language by Mohini Gupta, Making a Commonplace Grammar Book by Saurabh Goswami, How Feminists and the Invisibles Rule the World by Nandini Nair, and Priyanka Kapoor's topic was the role of truth. So she asked, without confirming what the majority wants, is there any other way to generate an audience? And my question was centered around building a brand identity. What we found was that most students gravitated towards Mohini and Nandini's questions. As I'm saying, this is the first time that we did this course. All of my observations are correlations rather than causations. So conducting this course with a diverse set of faculty and a diverse set of students will probably give me more understanding of why students behaved in the way they did. But yeah, most of the students ended up picking the relationship with the languages and feminist and invisible rule. One of the outcomes that I'm really fascinated by is how the students performed in their assignments. We saw, number one was that nobody missed the deadline for the assignment, which was a new high for us. Number two was that more than half the class scored an A, even though there were different instructors grading these. Even though there were different instructors who were grading these assignments. As you can see, 14% of the class scored an A plus. 56, an overwhelming 56.5 scored an A, and the remaining B and B plus. So that was a really good sign for us that we are doing some things right. Room for improvement. This is the feedback that we received from our students. Of course, the module was extremely short. They only got to spend 3 hours with each faculty member, which also included an activity. So it's about 2 hours of actual discussion time. So the course is extremely short. Yeah, they wanted it to be longer. More examples could be introduced. More topics could have been covered, and more books and more discussion of pieces from different books. So these were some of the feedbacks we've received, and most excitingly, some students also wanted more readings. Attendance was really high. Usual attendance for Vedica courses are range from somewhere around 85% to 90%, whereas this, perhaps also because this was conducted entirely online, we noticed the attendance was very high. Grades were also high. Faculty feedback was really great because students were participating in class, and students rated the course 4.5 out of 5. So yeah, that's the end of my presentation, and this is a course that we experimented with that I wanted to share with everybody.